Welcome everyone. In this topic we are going to have a look at configuring enterprise structures for Oracle Fusion Cloud Financials. So what is an enterprise? It's your company, and I really like this diagram because I think it describes an enterprise structure really well. Because your enterprise is your group of companies, so it's made up of legal entities or companies, and they are under common control and management. So they are under common control and management within that group. Now our legal entity are represented by what we call a balancing segment value in our chart of accounts. Because when we are entering transactions, we expect them to balance by our companies. So balance by the balancing segment, so they are associated to our legal entities. Now the legal entities are going to incur transactions which are accounted for in business units. So they are going to be incurring transactions in sub-ledgers, for example like payables and receivables. And they do that within a business unit, so most of our sub-ledgers working with a business unit. General ledgers working within a ledger. So once those transactions are accounted, they are then transferred across to a primary ledger. Here we call it a subsidiary ledger because you might have many primary ledger that represent your subsidiaries that you need to then consolidate into a corporate ledger so that you can do your reporting for the whole group. So we are going to be looking at configuring an enterprise structure using functional setup manager, and we are going to look at various tasks that need to be completed, and most of that going to be do within rapid implementation spreadsheet. Now a lot of what we are going to set up in general ledger is shared across the Oracle applications. So we have our account structure which include these things called value sets. So this contains the values for the segments within our chart of accounts. So what are our company values, what are our cost center values, what are our account values. This is for our chart of accounts. Now, a lot of what we are going to set up in general ledger is shared across the Oracle application. The chart of account is set up in general ledger and associated to a primary ledger, and then that will be used in the subledgers that are linked to that primary ledger. So in accounts payable, when I am entering my invoice, I will be using the chart of accounts that I created in general ledger to enter those invoice distributions. So where am I going to charge the cost or whatever it is I have bought? Where is that going to go? What account code is that going to go to? We have also security rules which can be set up to restrict users access to certain segment values. And then we also have cross-validation rules, which are another type of security rule that will make sure that everyone is entering what you consider to be valid account code combinations. So security rules is to do with a particular value set, whereas cross-validation is the whole combination. So for example, if you have a cost center called the balance sheet and you only want that to be used with balance sheet accounts, then you can set up a cross-validation rule to make sure that no one uses it with profit and loss account. Another shared component, accounting calendar. Now this is going to determine the accounting period for a transaction. So for example, in accounts payable, you would have an invoice date, and that date will be in a period within our calendar. And then where our currencies, again using AB as an example, this will allow us to enter invoices in account payable in our functional currency, but also any foreign currencies that we need to use using daily rates and rates type to do the conversion to our functional currency. So our daily rates are tied to a rate type. So you might have a rate type corporate, rate type reporting, rate type, that kind of thing. And then when that EB transaction is transferred across the GL, it's going to have a source and a category. So the source is where the transaction comes from, so payables, and the category is the type of transaction. So if it's an invoice, it will have a category of purchase invoices, for example. Now before you start your implementation, you are going to need to plan your requirements, and we have been talking about this chart of accounts. So you need to determine your chart of accounts segments. So what do you need? The chart of accounts is going to determine your reporting. So what do you need to have within that structure? So you can have up to 30 segments only, but it's more likely you are going to have less than that, and normally you will see between 5 and 9. I think the most I have seen in 15 or 16. So as I say, these segments would be things like company, line of business, cost center, project, intercompany, account, etc. And now the segments that they are going to have values to give them meaning, and you can also create hierarchies for reporting. So for example, you have got various accounts for your different revenue type, and then you will have a parent revenue account, which means you can report on individual revenue accounts or the total revenue, and that's a hierarchy which you create within your COA or chart of accounts. Back to our enterprise structures, we need to identify your legal entities, your legal addresses, your business unit. What are your key accounts for things like retained earning, cash, accounts receivable, accounts payable, revenue? So for example, retaining earning is a mandatory field when you are setting up your ledger. So you need to have an idea of what these accounts are going to be. When do you need to start your calendar? So does your year go from January to December, or is it April to March? And the start date is also important for when you actually want to start entering transactions, and also for loading historical data. You need to establish a relationship between legal entities and those balancing segment values. If you have more than one legal entity within a ledger, it's recommended that you map that legal entity to a balancing segment value in your chart of accounts. The primary balancing segment value really in your chart of accounts. And the business unit also points to a default legal entity. So which legal entity is going to be the default for your business units if you have got more than one within your ledger or your company? Then you also need to decide on your document sequencing. Do you need to have your documents, your journal sequences created? So are you sequencing your AB invoices, your journals, that kind of things? Is it required in the countries that you are implementing in? So in some countries it is. Places, for example, Spain, France, etc. They all have to have document sequencing. I don't think we do so much, for example, in UK. Well, not when I worked in an accounts department. We didn't have to everything sequenced, but I know that in some European countries you definitely do. They are very strict, so all of these things you need to consider. Regarding implementation, now there are a lot of to think about and a lot of setups. So we have simplified the implementation by having rapid implementation task list to help you with the tasks that you need to complete. So the standard financial task list contains over 900 tasks, whereas the rapid implementation one has over 90. And these are giving you the critical setup tasks for your initial setup, those that are required by most users. So using the rapid implementation task list minimizes the time needed for you to complete your key setups and enable the day-to-day use of Oracle Financial Cloud. And there are spreadsheets you can use to do a lot of others setups. So we have our enterprise structures and legal entities, our account defaults, and financial sequencing. Those are all within the rapid implementation spreadsheet that we use for GL. But then we also have spreadsheets for our banks, setting up taxes, fixed assets, and loads more. This is the end of our topic, brief of our enterprise structure and the rapid implementation for Oracle Fusion Cloud Financials. In the coming videos I will talk about rapid implementation spreadsheets and all of the required tasks to implement. Thanks for watching.